Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Nikki LaRose, and for today's video, I wanted to share my tips on how to contour. So I posted a video just recently on my YouTube on how to apply powder bronzer, and a lot of you were asking me how to apply contour as well. So this video is for you. These are some of my favorite, most easy tips on how to contour. So for this video, I'll actually be contouring with powder products on one side and then cream products on the other side. So to start, I already have a really thin amount of foundation all over. I have the Dior Backstage Face and Body in 2W, just to even out my skin. And now we're ready to get into the contour. So for the cream contour, I'll be using the Tantour cream contour from Huda Beauty in the shade Fair. And traditionally speaking, with makeup, contour products are typically on the cool side, and they should be more on the cool side because what they're doing is they're creating a shadow where you want to minimize appearances or features, I should say. It doesn't have to be gray. It doesn't have to be like super duper cool, but just have like a little bit of a hint of a cool undertone and then you'll be good to go because that's going to give you that shadowing effect. So now I want to talk about brushes. I have so many favorites for contour, specifically cream contour, but these are the ones that stand out the most. These are what I keep in my professional makeup kit. I also have duplicates of these for myself as well, but these brushes will just get the job done. They'll blend the product on. They're not super large in size, so you have more control. And that is another thing too, another really important tip. Don't use a brush that is way too big because you'll have a lot less control. And the whole idea behind contouring is using a very small amount in very specific places in order to create that shade and that shadowing effect and to minimize those areas that you're trying to minimize. So if I went in with like, let's say something much larger like this. So this is actually my preferred size for contour for a brush. And this is something that I would consider too large and would just make it really difficult to work with because you'll have a lot less control because it is so big. So you're going to end up applying way too much contour product. And then it kind of defeats the whole purpose, right? Because you don't want it to be super obvious that you're contouring. You want it to be very natural, very like undetectable. So the reason why I like this brush is it's small, but it still has some fluffiness to it. So what it does is it will give me a good amount of control and it will help me do some really like fine detailing work, which essentially is contouring. So enough said, I'm going to choose this brush to work with. This is my product, so I'm going to dip directly into the pan. And with cream products, I like to get a good amount on the brush and then just work it on the top of my hand and warm it up and evenly distribute that cream product all over the brush. And what that does is it's gonna help do a lot of like pre-blending for you. If you look online, there are a lot of things that can be misleading on how to contour, especially if you just go on social media in general. It could be very confusing trying to navigate like all these different tips and tutorials on how to contour your face. But ultimately, it's so personalized. It's such a personal thing that is unique to each person's face. And even if you look up the guides that are online, there's so many guides and they usually base how to contour off of your face shape. So me, for example, I have more of a heart-shaped face. Like I have a smaller, like softer chin area. My cheeks are a little bit fuller. I have a slightly bigger forehead. So my face is more of a heart shape. And typically, if you're looking at a contouring chart, they would tell you to contour like the side of your forehead for this face shape. It would tell you to contour just a little bit under the cheek, but you wouldn't contour anywhere underneath the jaw because heart-shaped faces do have more of a small, softer jawline. So you wouldn't want to minimize that even more. But that doesn't mean that you wouldn't want to take away just a little bit of excess, whatever you got going on underneath your chin. Some people still have like a little bit of excess skin that maybe they'd still want to contour, even if they have a heart-shaped face. So all that to say, contouring, like anything with makeup, contouring is super duper personal. And it also is based on what you like in your appearance and what you want to minimize. And don't let a chart or people online tell you what you should be contouring. It is a personal decision and I really, really stand by that. So this video, I just wanted to make it just to really help you guys out and kind of like just give some helpful tips on how to contour, but by no means just because I suggest it one way or the other. there's no right or wrong way to contour. It's personalized and it's unique to each person's face, no matter what people say online. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so I'm gonna start to get into it for real. So I'm gonna show you guys how I contour my face, and I'm gonna tell you why I do the things that I do. So, like I mentioned, I have larger cheeks. They're pretty full. With gravity and age, they're starting to fall down just a little bit. So when I'm doing my contour, I'm all about lifting and sculpting and bringing my cheeks back up. So what I like to do with contour specifically is I like to go higher than you typically would. Find the hollow of your cheek. So my cheekbone is right here. That's like the bulk of my cheekbone. And then right underneath, it's usually somewhere along the line of your ear, like straight across your ear. This is the hollow of your cheek, and this is traditionally where you want to contour or shade or minimize in appearance, right? So traditionally speaking, I should be contouring right here, but since this is a personal thing and a personal preference, I like to have my cheeks look a little bit higher up. So I actually like to go slightly above where I should be contouring, which would be right here. So I'm right on the line of where I should be contouring based on, you know, old school suggestions on where to place contour. But I'm breaking the rules a little bit by going just slightly higher up. And what that's doing is just giving my bigger cheeks a more lifted and sculpted effect. Another tip too for contouring is you want to be very mindful of how you're blending on your contour, especially if you're using like a cream product. You don't want to blend it out to the point where it's no longer there. You want to keep that color, you want to keep that pigmentation without over blending. And so what I like to do is just stipple it on. And honestly, I'm applying a lot more than I typically would or would feel necessary because I want it to be impactful on camera for you guys to really see the visual difference. But you don't need a lot of contour. You just need a small amount just to create a very subtle shadow. But what I want to do really quick, since I did go a little too low, I'm gonna take my concealer brush and just erase where I took that a little too far down while I was talking. You could also use this kind of technique with whatever foundation brush you just used to apply your foundation. And with whatever's left over, it's like the smallest amount will make a big difference. So before I move on to the other areas to contour, I want to show you guys the difference between my contoured cheek and my not contoured cheek. You can see like this part of my face looks a lot fuller. This side is a little bit more sculpted. I feel like I look a little more like sculpted and like lifted up based on where I applied that contour product. So let's move on to forehead contouring, and contouring your forehead is probably one of the easiest places to contour in general. So with contouring your forehead, you want to make sure that you are not leaving any visible gap between your hairline and your forehead. And so what this means is if you're applying a contour on your forehead, you want to make sure that you get it into your hairline. And it's not the most fun to have a product, like especially a cream product, all the way into your hairline. But if you really want it to be seamless and you don't want it to be detectable, where you see like that gap between your forehead contour and your more pale scalp or hairline, make sure you're blending it all the way in. So I'm gonna push my hair back, and I'm gonna take my contour, and I'm gonna start to stipple it at the very, very highest point of my hairline. So what I like to do is, instead of placing it just, you know, right in the center where you think you want to contour, I like to start as high as possible and then
work my way down gradually.
Starting really high, I'm going to get it all in my baby hairs. And you know what, this is why you wash your face thoroughly at night anyway, right? You wash your face thoroughly at night and you wash your hairline and you'll be good to go. So I'm pushing it in, starting really, really high up, like I said. And for me, the areas that I want to contour and like minimize on my forehead is just the perimeter. So just that outer perimeter, like the bulk of my forehead is right here. So I'm just trying to minimize the very bulk of my forehead, which is this spot right here, and that's it. So pressing it in. And now you can really see why I choose a small brush like this one. It's giving me that control. It's not applying the product all over in places that I don't want it. So you just have a really, like I said, you have great control with a small brush like this. And then taking whatever's left over on my brush, I'm just going to sweep it across and basically make a bridge going from one side of your forehead to the other side, so there's a connection and it's not disjointed. So you don't want there to be any separation. You want it to be nice and seamless and flow into each other, so there's no harsh lines specifically on your forehead. Okay, so now let's take a step back and evaluate the not contoured side of my forehead versus the contoured side of my forehead. So visually speaking, this side of my forehead, it's a little bit more toned down. The bulk of my forehead is a little bit softer. It's a little bit more pulled back. By creating that shadow with the contour, I minimize the size of my forehead, basically. So now I want to talk about jawline contour, and this is something that can go wrong very easily. So when you're contouring your jaw, usually it's to give you more of like a chiseled jaw effect, or it's to minimize the appearance of like a double chin. Like let's say you have like a little extra skin under your neck and you're trying to minimize that and you're trying to bring it down. Contouring is a great technique to utilize, but you want to make sure that you're doing less is more. So you don't want to pack on a ton of contour just to minimize the appearance of extra skin under your neck. It's very tricky because it's very detectable. So less is more. Make sure you're not applying too much and make sure you're keeping it right where the shadow naturally is. So here's the natural shadow of my jawline. So I wouldn't want to go above that because then you actually see it. It would be like you'd be walking around with a line of makeup on your face, like a stripe. So that is what you want to avoid at all costs. And it can be pretty tricky too, like depending on like how you're situated, like how you're sitting there doing your makeup or how you're standing or what your posture is. Like let's say you're doing it and you're looking way up and you think when you look down it's going to be in the right spot, but it's too far up. So it's just something to keep in mind. Be very careful with the placement of this because like I said, it can be very detectable and visually it's hard to hide. So I'm going to focus the contour just right here. I am not trying to contour my jawline at all because I don't want to minimize it. I already have like a really soft, small jawline. So the last thing that I want to do personally is contour my jawline. But if you're someone who wants to minimize their jawline and wants to bring it in a little bit and pull it back as far as like their features go, then absolutely you bring it all the way up underneath towards your ear and connect it all the way across towards your chin. But for me and my face shape, I'm just going to contour this spot right here. And then what you can do to make sure it's really well blended is whatever's left over on your brush, you can start to softly blend it upward towards your actual like visible jawline. So not just underneath. You want to focus the bulk of your product that you're applying underneath where you can't see it, and then gradually blend it just slightly up to create more of a shadow. So let's take a look at the difference that makes. Okay, now let's talk about nose contour. We're going to switch over to a smaller brush, a much smaller brush. So you'll notice this has an angle to it, which is great, and it's ideal for contouring your nose, especially if you're a beginner and you're trying to find like the right tools to make it easy. If you get yourself a small angle brush like this, that's still a little bit fluffy too. Like this still has some fluff to it. So what that's going to do is it's going to help to blend the product as you're applying it, and you won't have to work so hard to blend it out. So this is a BK Beauty brush. It's a 205 brush. So I'm going to use this to apply my nose contour. So I'm gonna use the same techniques as I did with my other brush. I'm going to buff the product into the brush completely. Okay, so I just wanna point this out one more time. Contouring your nose, just like any of the features on your face, it's all going to be so specific to you and what you personally want to see either minimized or even brought out more. So just keep that in mind. It's all personal. There's no right or wrong way to contour. This is gonna be simply a guide to help you out. So to contour your nose, for me personally, I'm not trying to thin out my nose at all. So I'm doing this just purely to teach you guys how to contour your nose if you want to do that at home. So to contour your nose, what you want to do, and the best and easiest way, in my opinion, to start a nose contour is not starting it down here, okay? It's not where you would think to start it. It's starting it right here in like this little nook. So by starting it at the very top of the bridge of your nose and using the inner part of your brow as a guide, so you want to start it right here and then bring it directly down. So just swooping it straight down your nose. And of course, what that's going to do is it's going to minimize the width of your nose, of course. So if you're someone who is trying to slim their nose and make it appear a little bit more thin, that's the easiest, most foolproof way to contour your nose. Now, let's say you're someone who wants to minimize the length of their nose as well. So if you have a nose where you're trying to bring it up and maybe minimize the length of it, like the tip, you would take your contour and you would shade right at the tip of your nose and create that shadow and pull that feature back in, right? So this is gonna help to shade it in, and it's going to minimize the length of your nose. And then one more tip that I wanna show you guys is, let's say you want your nose to be a little bit more turned up and have more of like a button effect is the best way I can describe it. What you would do is take that contour and you would draw a line straight across. And what that's going to do, eventually when I do this side, you'll see what I'm doing, but it's going to help to bring out where we don't have the contour and really enhance the highlighted part of our nose. And it will give your nose a little bit of a shape up and a lift up, essentially. So if you have more of like a rounded area right here on your nose and you want to bring it down, like minimize that appearance of that part, then you would just contour straight across. And what that's going to do is just create a little bit of a lift up. Okay, so now I'm just going to kind of dab it in. I went a little too high. Wipe it off the side of my nose there because I'm going to do powder contour in a second. Okay, so those are the basics on how to apply a cream contour. So now I'm going to move on to this side of my face and use a powder product to contour. But before I do, it's really important that I powder my face on this side since I don't have any powder on the rest of my face because I was just doing a cream contour. Like I mentioned earlier, I have my foundation on my whole face, but I did not powder it. So I'm gonna use a little bit of setting powder just to mattify this side of my face so that way when I go on with my powder contour, it's going to glide on easy. I'm gonna get a nice, seamless, easy blend and it's not going to tug or skip on my like more wet skin. So just taking a little bit of loose powder, I'm gonna quickly powder this side of my face, anywhere I'm going to contour, especially. So the side of my cheek, top of my forehead, side of my nose, and a little under my jaw. So for powder contour, let's talk about brushes. And specifically, I love this brush from MAC. And there's a million dupes out there, and there's a million brushes that look just like this, like size, shape, fluffiness, all that stuff. But this is like the OG one. This one's from MAC. It's a 168 brush. Sorry, I had to really read that because it's totally rubbed off. But anyway, this brush is amazing for any powder contour. And it's similar in the idea of this one. So the reason why I use this one for my nose contour is it's small, but it's got a little angle and it still has a little bit of fluff to it. So it made contouring and blending at the same time super easy. It's the same idea with this one. So for powder contour, if you get a brush around this size, this density, and it has an angle, it will make it so much easier to apply that powder contour versus using a big brush, like something that I would use traditionally for powder bronzer and powder bronzer placement. This is a great brush for that kind of product, but you wouldn't want to use a brush this big and this fluffy for powder contour, because it's the same thing on this side where you're just trying to minimize and shade in very specific spots. Okay, and so for powder contour, the same rules apply as far as undertone goes. So you make sure you find something that has slightly more of a cool undertone to it and not so much an orangey or red or really like warm yellow undertone to it. It's gotta have just a little more coolness to it. So one of my favorite options, and I know it's really hard to find this palette. In fact, I think it's still sold out like in so many places, but just to show you guys as an example of what I'm talking about, this is a cool tone. Like this has a very cool, almost gray undertone to it, and it's going to make it ideal for creating that shadow effect for contour. So let me show you guys using this color. Another option too that's like very accessible and a little more neutral too. Like this is not the most neutral as far as like contour colors, but Hula from Benefit, I've used this for so many years. It's such a great, slightly more cool toned bronzer. And since it does have more of a cool undertone to it, meaning like it's not orangey, it is a great product for contouring. So I'm gonna take my angled 168 brush from MAC and dip into that cool toned sculpting shade. Tap off the excess. So same thing, you could find the hollow of your cheek, or you can make that kind of face. So this is where you'd want to contour. But again, like I mentioned earlier on this side, I like to go a little bit higher. So now that we've talked about the techniques and the undertones and the tools and all those things, the big difference between powder contour versus cream contour, if you're someone, there's a couple different reasons why you'd want to choose either one. So for instance, cream contour tends to be a little more natural looking. Like the finish of it looks a little more natural on your skin because it's a cream contour. It just tends to melt better into your skin. It lays more natural on your skin. It's great if you have more dry skin because it's going to be more of like a hydrating, natural feeling product on your skin. And then powder contour tends to be a little more noticeable if you're not great at blending. It could be more detectable, whereas like cream products, like I said, just kind of melt into your skin and just look more like skin because they're a cream product, right? So the finish of them just looks more like skin versus powder. It's going to be a little more obvious. It can be a little more difficult to blend on if you don't have a properly set base like I just showed you how to do. So things like that are something to take into consideration. If you're someone who has extremely oily skin and you don't want to add like that creamy product for your contour, then by all means, a powder contour is going to be ideal for you. Another thing too, if you're someone who has maybe more texture in their skin, and sometimes with cream products, they can settle into fine lines, they could settle into more textured areas of your skin. So if you have more texture and you're not wanting to bring out that texture, then a nice matte formula and a powder bronzer is going to be ideal for you. So those are just some helpful things to point out when you're trying to figure out what kind of formula to use for a contour product. Take into consideration your skin type, your texture, all those things. So let's finish up this side of my face.
What's your mirror?
So I'm just sucking in my cheek and then pushing this contour up and underneath my cheekbone. So as far as like what I prefer with contour products, generally speaking, I prefer a cream contour, but it all depends. Like if I'm working on myself, I love a cream contour myself. If I'm working on a client and like I mentioned, if they have like more texture or if they have really oily skin, then I will definitely opt for a good powder contour instead. So it's always unique to the client and their skin and their needs. But for me personally, I love the way a good cream contour looks. I think it looks just so natural and more skin-like. And now to wrap this up, I'm going to finish my nose contour on this side using the powder. And I'm going to switch to just a blending brush. This is a blending eyeshadow brush. It's a 217 from MAC. No, it does not have an angle on it, but that is okay. You can still blend this on super easy with a fluffy eyeshadow brush. So starting at the top of my nose, the very top of the bridge, connecting this little inner corner where my brow and the top of the bridge of my nose begins, and then just sweeping it down. And then going around, connect it to the bottom where I have that previous contour. And this is just my foundation brush that I used previously to apply that Dior foundation. So it's got a little bit of excess product in it. And I just like to push around the sides just to give it a really natural blend.
How am I going to see the difference now? You just blended both sides.
Okay, so contour is done. We have our cream contour on the side, we have our powder contour on the side. So let's just take a step back, take a look, and just want to point out one more time too, there's no right or wrong side. It's going to come down to preference and what you prefer to use. Okay, so that completes this video. These are my tips on how to contour, and I know it could be super daunting trying to figure out how to contour and what areas to contour and all those things. So I really hope this video helps you out and hopes to kind of bring some clarity to the whole subject. If you have any other questions on contouring, make sure you leave me a comment below. If you like this video and you found it helpful, give it a big thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok. I'm at Makeup by Nikki LaRose, where you can find other makeup tutorials there and you can talk to me there. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.